You're watching Talking Points, a focus on the political scene in Lubbock and across the South Plains. Sponsored by Capital Mortgage Services.
Welcome back to the show. Here's a look at some of the political headlines of the past week. It's campaign announcement season, and Lubbock Democrat Samantha Carrillo Fields again wants to serve District 84 down in Austin. Fields, though, will face incumbent Republican John Frullo and says one of her biggest concerns remains the state of health care for Texans. This is the second time Ms. Fields has run against Frullo, coming up short back in 2018. Another Democrat has entered the race to unseat Texan John Cornyn in the U.S. Senate. Dallas lawmaker Royce West joins an already crowded field for the primary in early 2020. He's going to have to defeat, though, Air Force veteran and former House candidate M.J. Hager, as well as Houston City Council member Amanda Edwards first. The last Democrat elected to this seat was Lyndon B. Johnson. Also climbing back into the political arena, Wendy Davis, the former Texas Democratic gubernatorial candidate, is running for Congress now out of the Austin area. She's taking on U.S. Representative Chip Roy. Well, state voters will have to vote on 10 proposed changes to the Texas Constitution on the ballot this November. The Texas Secretary of State's office drew the ballot order out of a hat this week. The measures include whether or not to permanently ban state income tax, whether to establish a fund to pay for flood prevention and disaster relief projects. There's also a measure to determine how much of the state's sporting goods sales tax should go into state parks, and one that would allow Texas to dole out billions of dollars for cancer research.
I want to impress everyone the importance of this election come November 5th, that Texans do have the ability to impact the way we function as a state, and it's very important. So we encourage all eligible Texans to register to vote.
Yeah, the last day to register is for the November election is October 7th. We've put a complete list of the propositions that you will vote on up on our website, everythinglubbock.com. Well, the big national headline of the week, the most highly anticipated and then debated congressional hearings the nation has seen in a long time. Special counsel Robert Mueller grilled for 2 hours by 2 different committees, detailing his 2-year investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. As our Anna Warneke reports, the lawmakers from Texas had some particularly intense interactions with Mueller. She's got a closer look at how it all went down.
The Judiciary Committee will come to order.
7 hours, 2 committee hearings, and 1 witness.
The report is my testimony, and I will stay within that text.
And that's exactly what former special counsel Robert Mueller did.
I direct you to the report.
Texas Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee says when she reads the report, it looks to her like President Trump obstructed justice.
Does obstruction of justice warrant a lot of time in jail
Yes.
if you were convicted?
Yes.
But Texas Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert defended the president.
What he's doing is not obstructing justice. He is pursuing justice.
And attacked Mueller.
And the fact that you ran it out 2 years means you perpetuated injustice.
Mueller says his report is clear. He found no criminal conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Russians in the 2016 election. But he repeated that his report does not exonerate the president on obstruction of justice. That irked Texas Republican John Radcliffe, who suggested that the special counsel treated the president unfairly.
Donald Trump is not above the law. He's not. But he damn sure shouldn't be below the law, which is where Volume 2 of this report puts him.
Texas Democrat Joaquin Castro continues to call for impeachment of the president.
Donald Trump over the years has surrounded himself with some very shady people that lied for him.
But Texas Republican Will Hurd says it's time to shift the focus away from the president.
How do we prevent Russian intelligence and other adversaries from doing this again?
In Washington, I'm Anna Warneke.
So here to spend 5 good minutes with us is our Washington correspondent, Anna Warneke. Anna, it's always good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Avery.
Thanks so much for joining us to break all of this down. Now, Anna, we heard it there in your story, the stark contrast in how the Democrats and the Republicans approached these hearings. Some people even saying that it just proves that the partisan divide is deeper than ever. Listening to their questions from those lawmakers, what's your take on that?
You know, these were two very highly anticipated hearings. Lawmakers had a lot of time to prepare. So as you can expect, and what you saw were a lot of emotions from lawmakers when they were questioning former special counsel Robert Mueller. Both Democrats and Republicans walked into the hearing with very different agendas. Democrats were hoping his testimony would build their case for impeachment. We did talk to some Democrats following the hearings who are confident that it worked. Republicans, on the other hand, they walked away saying that they didn't learn anything new. So I think this partisan divide that you say people are talking about on Capitol Hill was here before the hearings, and I don't think anything has really changed.
A lot of people saying that they didn't learn anything new. I know a lot of people were surprised by the brevity of Mueller's answers. Lots of yeses, nos, obviously sticking to that original report. Is that something you guys see a lot in these types of congressional hearings, or was that unexpected?
You know, it wasn't unexpected because Mueller was very clear when he sat down that he was not going to answer any questions regarding the origins of the counterintelligence investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. That was a huge disappointment for Republicans. And he also said he was not going to answer any questions regarding Attorney General Barr or any actions of Congress. So, you know, what we saw for the 7 hours of his testimony was Mueller sticking to his promise that he would not go beyond the bounds of his report, and that's exactly what we saw.
To dig through in that report as well, lots to go through. You mentioned those 7 hours of testimony. In those 7 hours, though, he did call the Russian government's effort to intervene in our election one of the most serious challenges to our democracy he's ever seen. Timely, of course, the Senate Intelligence Committee releases an election security report this week. Do you mind breaking that down for people here? What was in that, and what should people be looking for when they're looking into it?
Yeah, Avery, this report released this week, it really details Russia's attempts to hack U.S. infrastructure in the 2016 election. And it was really a warning to states, saying that all 50 states were targeted by Russia. You know, their ballot boxes were targeted. And so it was a warning to states and the federal government that they need to do more to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. It also included some recommendations like paper ballots. So there's a paper trail of votes, and more communications between states and the federal government, including the Department of Homeland Security, leading up to Election Day.
Also going on this week in the same vein, election security legislation trying to be passed, crafted by Democrats, but obviously Republican Mitch McConnell blocking a bill there. What was that controversy like going on the Hill this week?
Yeah, well, Senate Democrats did introduce 2 bills regarding enhancing election security and funding election security following Mueller's testimony. But both bills were blocked by Republicans because they said it was too partisan, which is very interesting because Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said that securing the ballot box is one of his top priorities. So we're just going to have to wait and see if the Republicans introduce their own legislation regarding securing the ballot box when they return back from August recess in September.
Think are the chances we'll see another resurgence of an effort to push through some election security legislation before November?
I think that it is definitely going to be a top priority for Democrats and Republicans. We saw it in some of the hearings. Texas Republican Congressman Will Hurd questioned former Special Counsel Robert Mueller during the hearings, saying that we need to make this a top priority, especially heading into the next election. So I think as lawmakers come back to Washington, D.C. in September, we're going to see a lot of different legislation introduced, and we're going to see this as a hot topic here on Capitol Hill.
To look forward to ahead of those elections and after that recess as well. So Anna Warneke, I know this won't be the last time we speak to you before the elections, but thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Well, still to come here on Talking Points, a county HR report details some remarks made by one of our constables that are raising eyebrows. We're going to have the details on those next.